Good evening and welcome to another edition of Taking It Back to the Streets. This is episode number 3. My name is Andy Michaud. It's good to be back on TV after 22 years. And tonight I have a very special guest, probably the person that has his finger on the pulse of the city of Waterbury more than anybody else. He's been covering the city of Waterbury. He knows the inside workings of City Hall. And he's shown that throughout the last 32 years with his newspaper and his internet site. And that's John Murray from the Waterbury Observer. John, thanks so much for coming on tonight. I really appreciate it, just like old times.
Great to be here, and welcome back into the arena. It's been kind of boring without you stepping right up and roaring. Like, you really get the attention of the powerful and the elite. You say things that nobody else says. And you jam a flashlight into areas that people are often afraid to jam a flashlight. So welcome back, and let's jam a flashlight.
I like that story. Let's talk a little bit. I know right before we went on, we were talking about, the Waterbury Observer. It's 32 years. You've been in existence. October 28th was your first paper, 1993.
Yeah,
it was a great paper. I mean,
yeah,
I was in it, so it was a good one, but go ahead.
So I have a surprise for you. This is the first paper of the Waterbury Observer. It came out October 28th, 1993. And this is the back page of the Waterbury Observer. Michaud for mayor, a vote for hope. And this is where our lives intersected, and they've been intersected for a long, long time, and powerfully so. That we started out the Observer, and it came out right before the 1993 election, and it was incumbent Mike Bergen against Republican challenger Steve Soma and independent wild card Andy Michaud. So I started this paper with Marty Begnall, and we wanted to sit down with the mayoral candidates and do a question and answer with all 3 candidates. And I was watching closely. The Republican American is not mentioning your name. And there's a debate in the chamber. You're not invited to it. And it's like, you are getting ignored. And so Marty and I sat down with you. We sat down with Mike Bergen and we sat down with Steve Soma and gave you each the same amount of space. And so here was our questions. We tape recorded it. Here was the answer. So we transcribed it. So if we look like an idiot, there it is. If you look like an idiot, there it is. And so we gave you, I think it was like 4 or 5 pages. This is your interview. So big interview. Andy Michaud, here's Steve Soma. I think the other one was Bergen up front. And then the jump to other pages, very detailed stuff. And after the paper came out, Bergen called our answer machine and said it was the fairest, most comprehensive election coverage in the history of Waterbury. Because politics was so slanted for so long with the monopoly of the Waterbury Republican that they were promoting the Republican Party. So you were getting dissed, Bergen was getting dissed. So we offered this up, we offered this space up, and not only did you then became, you bought radio ads saying pick up that new paper, the Waterbury Observer. So we didn't have any money for radio ads, so you're banging the radio saying read that paper. You came on cable access and did an hour special show the night before the election, holding the paper up, read this paper. You became a champion of the Waterbury Observer. So you, on election day, you ended up with 911 votes, which was pretty good for an independent. And the election was decided by, I think, 211 votes. So you arguably swung that election with your entrance into politics. But right after that, so now Andy Michaud's no longer a mayoral candidate. A week or two later, there's a Board of Aldermen meeting and Frank Davino gets up and he presents this whole thing about the Palace Theater. So right after the election, here's the Palace Theater, and he slams his fist on the table and says, "This is a done deal. We figured this out with Temporally, where the city's going to buy the palace, we're going to fix it up, we're going to open this thing back up." And then started a blistering fight that Margaret Boisford, do you remember her name?
Margaret Boisvert, that's a blast from the past.
So it was a done deal where 14 aldermen voted in favor of this. Only Tony D'Amelio dissented. And so 14 people said, go with this. Margaret Boisford started a petition and forced a referendum. That was on June 28, 1994. And the referendum, she won. They shot down the thing. But from November to June, you took to cable access and started doing all these incredible shows about the Palace Theater. Every week, it was a Palace special. You're getting all these people on. So for anyone who's wondering why this guy is passionate about the Palace Theater now, he has always been passionate about the Palace Theater. All the way back to 1993, they cut you. There was the Palace Theater coming out of you. And so you've been championing the Palace Theater and the people using the theater since 1993. So what do you have to say about that?
I have to say, yeah, back in the day we had the Palace Theater show. You were a guest on, I think, 1 or 2 times. I know we were up in the balcony, had the stage behind us. I got to find the lost Palace Theater tapes, but once I find them, I want to put them back on. And, you know, we did some great stuff in that theater. Arms Around the Palace, had, I don't know, 1,000 people holding hands all the way around the palace, the gospel singers
It's
praying.
so important for listeners who you're going to detail so much stuff to them about the amount of shows now, about the contract, about Frank Tavera. But you go back to that moment there, the city of Waterbury was buying the Palace Theater from Dom Temporally, I think for $1.8 million or $2 million, and they were going to put another 2.5. I might be wrong, but it was under $5 million.
Yep.
And it was going to be a community-based theater. And it would be rock and roll, it would be the Nutmeg Ballet, it would be all kinds of stuff, all just what you're talking about. It would be 100 shows, 150 shows. It was for the community to pump life into downtown. And so what ended up happening, as you've detailed, it took 10 years. 10 years later, and it was $28 million, the deal that came in. And then it was Union House. So now instead of it a community house, a community theater for the people of Waterbury, the people of Waterbury still own it, but now it's Broadway shows. A handful of Broadway shows. I think 6 Broadway shows they do. They bring in 6 a year. Those are the big boulders that they build around. So then the community's locked out. They're locked out from, because they can't get in. They can't, it's a union house. If the Connecticut Dance Theater wanted to do the Nutmeg Ballet, they got to pay $10,000 up front before, just to turn the lights on. It's $10,000.
Just to have a cup of coffee.
Yeah. And so you're not getting the community theater. You're not getting the stuff that the Warner Theater has or the Thomaston Opera House that the Palace Theater is bigger than those places. But you can't get those kind of shows into those places. Like Broadway's not going to the Warner Theater. Off-Broadway's not going to the Thomaston Opera House. So it became, what was the theater going to be? Is it for the people, or is it for this union elite shop? And who made that decision? Because that's why we're in the situation we're in right now. And so a group of people made the decision not to have Waterbury's, the theater owned by the people of Waterbury, but they're not after the Broadway stuff. They want all this other stuff, the stuff that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, that's why I've been talking about the Palace Theater since day one, 1993. I mean, I had so many fond memories growing up, I think I was 16 years old when I saw my first concert there. Jeff Beck and the On Hammer Group, my buddy Bob Izzo, sat in the second row balcony, things, you don't forget. I mean, it was incredible theater. And I always said that the Palace Theater is the heart and soul of Waterbury. I don't know of any other facility that could hold almost 2,700 people at one time. The gyms in the city can't, the auditoriums in the city can't. Maybe Municipal Stadium, that's outdoor, but this is the heart and soul of Waterbury. We could just bring so many people together at one time into that theater, and we've been completely shut out for the last 20 years.
So you go back to when John Rowland had this $300 million revitalization project in downtown, where they're going to build Waterbury Arts Magnet, bring UConn Waterbury downtown, and put this $28 million into the Palace Theater. It was kind of a package deal that you needed all three of them to make the thing work. So it happens, but it happened at lightning speed. And in the 2000, I think it was the 2000, it might have been the 2000 election, that Larry DiPillo was the Democratic candidate, and he was saying I'm running for mayor. And the first thing he said is, I'm going to stop that stuff on East Main Street, and we want to open this up to public hearings, let the public voice their opinions about this. And Larry was adamant that corners had been cut. It was like a race to get this thing into place. And he goes, what's the hurry? Let's do this right. Let's get the people involved. And the people were not involved. And this thing was a race to opening. Larry then became a target because the sitting governor, John Rowland, this is his pet project in his hometown, and Larry DiPillo is saying, I'm going to slow that down. And John Rowland didn't like that. So Larry, all the numbers, Larry was going to be the mayor. He was going to be elected mayor. And John Rowland went to Mike Jarjura and said, you've got to run. And Mike said, no, I don't want to. I don't want to be mayor. And so it's Larry continuing to roar. And Rowland went back to Mike Jarjura, and he said no. And he goes back to him again, says, you've got to do this. And Mike Jarjura did it. And he won by 11 votes in a primary. He beat Larry DiPillo. And then it was no public hearings about the Palace Theater, no public hearings about UConn, no public hearings at all. Whoosh.
No referendums.
No referendums. Which, as I've listened to your shows before, like you're saying, how do you stop what's going on right now? And this is just a thought. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the details of this. But you look at Margaret Boisford. That's one lady. She forced a referendum on the Palace Theater and upended the whole thing back in 1994. Is there a route to bring this whole issue to the people of Waterbury right now so that they can vote on this contract or vote on this deal? Is there some way to do that you bring, because this is, the people of Waterbury own this theater, and they're not part of it. As you pointed out, the decision makers are from out of town. They're from out of town. That when the first year the Palace was open, that I remember talking to this lovely young lady. Her name was Rory. She was the marketing person there, and so she was placing ads in the Observer. And she said at first their target was out in suburbia. She said after the first year, they found that 39% of the users of the Palace Theater were Waterbury residents right here. And she goes, they were shocked by that. They thought historically the Bushnell's not supported by Hartford, is supported by West Hartford or Glastonbury or out in the burbs there. But here, they said it was shocking to them the loyalty that Waterbury had to this theater. And so it was almost 40% of the people going into that were from Waterbury. But I think that number has to have dwindled. It's dwindled because of the Palace Theater is not embracing to Waterbury. It's embracing out in suburbia. They don't market in Waterbury. They're not really trying to work on Waterbury and get Waterbury in there. And you had said in your previous show that you thought it was racism. I'm sure there's some elements of that, and you brought my name up and said that it was all, I think there's institutional racism everywhere.
Systemic.
Systemic. Well, I do believe that. But I think it's class, it's demographics. They don't want Waterbury in that theater. They don't want the Waterbury demographics in that theater. They want, you look at the demographics. Waterbury, the average household makes $36,000. You go over the border into Prospect, and it's $88,000. That's what they want in the theater, the people with disposable income. So I've pontificated enough. So
What are you saying, though? We should have a referendum?
yeah,
That's not a bad idea, John.
I think that is the way that you can upend this whole thing. Because you're up against power. You're up against deep entrenched power. And I think Mike Jarjura, I was in a conversation with you and him in the lobby of the Palace Theater, and he was the mayor for like a year, and I was talking to him like, are you going to go to a lot of shows? He goes, I don't go to theater. I don't like theater. And he goes, he may go to a choir that was coming in that he wanted to see, some Waterbury choral. He said the Christmas concert, he wanted to see that. Nothing else interested him. Neil O'Leary is not a theater goer. He's not interested in the arts. So our mayors for 25 years, or for 24 years, were not focused on the arts. They weren't focused on quality of life. They were bricks and mortar. They're knocking down the factory. They're paving that street, building that school, not the arts. They weren't paying attention to that. Neither man, Mike Jarjura or Neil O'Leary. And so you ask why they would allow all this to go. It's not on their radar screen. It's way down their list with what's inanimate, what are we going to do on Freight Street. That's what they're talking about, not how many shows Frank Tavera put on.
Well, I know I had Mike DiGiancarlo, the president of the Board of Ed, on, and he was explaining that there's some language that there was discrepancy, that he thought was a discrepancy in the operating agreement between events and performances. Mm-hmm. And because it started off saying events, supposedly, in Frank Tavera's mind, an event meant basically anything. Anything could be an event at the Palace Theater. And based on their track record and number of shows, I mean, they have one here, Palace Theater Tour, 8 people. So to them, or to Frank Tavera, that's an event. He's supposed to do 100 a year. That's 1 out of 100. And then you follow the rest of these tours and jazz and trivia and table reading. They're all 20, 30 people that go to these things.
I think you forced them out of the pocket in a football term. Is you put a lot of pressure on them. And I don't know the exact year. It was 2017, maybe?
18.
2018, when you started your relentless post on Facebook of the lights are off, the lights are off, the lights are off, the lights are, and you are
Caught their attention?
You are a bulldog. You're just going to keep biting and biting like a Gila monster. You're not letting go. Just go, 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 and eventually you poked at me a little bit, and eventually I started to look at the issue, and I ended up doing a big story where I went to Frank Tavera and interviewed Frank Tavera, and he explained about the Union House. He goes, this is a Union House. We're not doing the rock and roll concerts and all this stuff. This is what the mission is over here. And so rewind all the way back to when they started it. Like, who said that was the mission? Who decided that? Not the people of Waterbury. They didn't decide that.
Frank Tavera did.
Or, no, I would think it's people up above Frank Tavera.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he's just basically their patsy. He's doing their job.
What is this theater going to be? And a lot of these decisions are made. When I did that story, Frank Montero was on the board, and Dr. Jacoby were. I think they might have been co-chairmans of the board. Both of them live out in the Berries. I talked to them about stuff. I talked to Neil O'Leary, and there was some very compelling stuff about what is this thing going to be. And the conclusion was if you wanted to change it, you have to redo the contract with the unions and make them have concessions and asterisks. Okay, we can have 25 community shows, but the union is so tenacious. It's just their way or the highway. So you peel this all back. I did this big story, and O'Leary said the contract was coming up. There was opportunity to negotiate. Nothing got negotiated. Nothing really changed. And what changed is because I went and asked Frank Tavera questions. They pulled their advertising from the Waterbury Observer and never advertised again. And they were frequent advertisers, and that's like whack, punish you for having the audacity to
question them.
To put a spotlight on me. Okay, psh, you're off the list. And that's what makes Waterbury so difficult to deal with, is these power bases that you can't challenge because they'll find a stick or a rock and beat you with it. And so here we are, 7 years later, still talking about the same thing. And so how do you change it? And you probably have to talk to a lawyer about it, but how did Margaret Boisford do this? Andy Michaud could do this.
Well, I mean, there was, like you mentioned, Larry DePillo at the time, and Larry was behind the referendum, and he had a group of people, and they all worked getting signatures to force a referendum, and that's how that started. As far as the rest of it, I'm not exactly sure. I mean, what's going to be next is we have to do something to get the theater open for the people.
Well, you have to ask the people what they want. They own the theater.
They don't know what they want because they were never in it. It's just like me. I always say I go at the bottom of Cook Street, going up the hill. There's, I think, a little Baptist church, nice little church, but I've never been in it because I'm not Baptist. These people, the blacks, the Hispanics, the blue-collar whites, most of them have never been in this theater. It's not something that was taken away from them. They never had it. They were never in it. So they're not complaining like I am that they're being shortchanged, which they are. And that's basically, Frank Tavera is the one that said on Dawn Mirano's radio show about 1.5 years ago, he went on because I was complaining and he decided to go on. And he said, I promised the people of Waterbury Broadway and I delivered, he said. What he delivered was exactly what you just said, the union. Everything has to go through the union. So I know local people have gone up, would like to do something here, have a fundraiser or whatever. It's 10 large to sit down and have a cup of coffee with us. So they just excluded everybody. Yeah. And that's how they did their systemic racism, was through the union. So to make this theater a viable theater, to do what we're talking about, to me, you got to start from scratch.
Well, if you have a referendum, you have to upend this model. And so what you can't have a community-based theater with no union. Broadway's not coming here, so you lose that. So you're not going to have those 6 shows that come and however many nights a year they play, which is it's a major draw. It's a major draw for suburbia, and they come in here, and when it was Phantom of the Opera or Rent or whatever they get some good shows in there. But you have to flip that model because you can't have them both. It's unless the union caves. If the union caves and says, okay, this is what we're doing on our 30 nights a year, and then that's our deal. So what is their benefit if the thing is dark for 150 days? Well, how does the union benefit from that? They don't.
Well, they're happy making their money from the Broadway shows.
Yeah, so if they make their money on the Broadway show, why can't everybody eat at the Palace Theater?
Because it's union.
But the unions, but whoever negotiates that contract, like how long is this latest contract? How long is it good for?
Well, first it was 20 years, which we passed that, and then they get 20 more years.
So they've already signed a new 20-year?
Oh, I don't think they signed anything. It's just in the agreement. It just rolls over. 20 years, and you got a 10-year stint after that, and then a 10-year stint after that, 40 years.
So, but you have very compelling evidence that they broke the contract. With what is promised, they broke the contract. So
because of technicality, because of a word. So I misinterpret a word, so that means I get to do nothing, which all these bogus small events, that's exactly what they are. They have a staff of 30 people. 30 people. In the year of 23, 22, that fiscal year, they did 25 Palace Theater shows. And, you know, as you said, that's their major draw. But if you look at what they did, they had Herbie Hancock, 54% full. They did Fiddler on the Roof, 3 nights, like you said, 54% full. Hammer of the Gods, 22%. Red Hot Chili Peppers, 34%. My Fair Lady, 37%. I don't know of any venue in the state of Connecticut, anywhere, that could operate with such low numbers. I don't remember the last time I went to a show anywhere that had less than 50%. They're averaging about 47% on all their shows. And the reason that they're able to stay in business is because they don't have expenses. They don't pay taxes. They don't pay any kind of rent. They don't have a lease. Just till recently, I was screaming and yelling that they weren't paying utilities. Come to find out, they weren't paying utilities, and they had it separated 4 years ago, I think at a cost of $10 million, I heard, but they weren't paying utilities. They get money from the city, from the Board of Ed. They get money from WAMS. They get money from the Ramp Garage. They get money from the state. So there's no incentive for them to have shows.
Well, the word that pops in my mind isn't incentive, it's accountability. It's where's the accountability? Because when it was the paperwork trail back in 2018, when you were asking those questions, is that suddenly they were throwing papers at the board. They hadn't been submitting their paperwork.
No.
And so the Board of Aldermen, like, who's overseeing what Frank Tavera and the Palace Theater is doing? Who's the watchdog of this?
Nobody.
Well, there's a big problem right there.
Well, there is a watchdog, the mayor.
Well, the mayor was.
We've had 3 mayors.
Well, then all 3 of them failed that test of holding the Palace Theater accountable. And when I interviewed Mayor O'Leary back in 2018, he was saying some very strong things about how it had to change, but it hasn't changed.
Nothing's changed. Why? Why do you think?
Well, as is really behind almost every curtain in Waterbury is very powerful, influential people that are unelected. And
The money guys.
the money guys. And it's true in, it's not just Waterbury, it's true in the communities all across the country. It's bankers, it's real estate developers, it's the people that fuel the campaigns, that have the influence behind the scenes. So here's a new candidate, that how does he get the money? So somebody has a fundraiser out in Middlebury, raises $100,000 for him, and now you're beholden to that guy. And so that's the trick. You hold a fundraiser in Waterbury, you're not raising $100,000. People don't have that kind of money, and they also don't have that kind of influence. And so it really it goes very, very deep. The alderman by district, which I fought for years and years, and you fought for it as well, is that when there was 40% of the city that had no representation, the south end and the north end, they had no alderman. So when they, for 100 years, so when they finally get an alderman, so the leaders in the south end say, okay, who wants to be an alderman? Nobody even knows what an alderman is.
No, they've never been engaged in
No,
city
they're not
politics.
engaged, because keep them on the sideline over there. Keep them on the sideline. Don't get them informed. So it's been very difficult to get quality aldermanic candidates in some of these pockets of Waterbury, because there's really no feeder system. They don't understand what it is. They don't understand what you get from City Hall. What's the importance of being an alderman? Well, maybe you get your road paved. Maybe you get a new firehouse. Maybe you get something down
Maybe your
there.
husband gets a job.
Yeah, maybe your husband gets a job. But then when alderman by district passed, historically passed in 2014, I think. So, and I had done lots of interviews with aldermen, and I said, when you're elected to the Board of Aldermen, or you're appointed to the Board of Aldermen, do you know what's going on? And one after another says, I have no idea what's going on in
Clueless.
these meetings. I said, could you have benefited from basic training, like a one-day seminar about what Robert's Rules of Order, or how do you try and start an ordinance? And every single one said yes. So I go to Mayor O'Leary and I said, now we have aldermen by district. You've got to train them. Oh, good idea, John. He writes it down. I got to talk to Linda Wibby about that. So like a few months later, what's going on with that? Oh yeah, so he writes it down again. So this is a game that we played for, I would, every 6 or 12 months, I'd say, what's going on with that? He goes, oh, I got to talk to Linda, it's getting hung. He had no interest in
Sounds
training.
like he received it and placed it on file. Right into the garbage.
No interest in training the aldermen. So now I interviewed current mayor, Paul Pernaruski. He's running to be the mayor, and he was against aldermen by district. He was the board president. He was all the Democrats were against this. So I asked him, I was at WATR, we had a radio show, and at the end of it I said, what's going on with aldermen by district? Are you willing to do this training? And he goes, why? Why would I do that? And because you'd empower the aldermen, you'd empower the people. And his answer was, why would I do that?
Keep them ignorant. Keep them in the dark.
Now, after all this time, he's going to be the mayor. Why would he dilute his power?
Why would he do that? He wouldn't.
Somebody has to do that. Somebody has to do that. The people rose up and did it a little bit with the alderman by district, but alderman by district has not worked yet because you don't have like a burr in the foot, that's really agitating. That's why I think if you had won your primary, you would be a perfect alderman because you're fearless. You just stand up and say whatever's on your mind. This young man who's running with the Democrats, Nelson Roman, he has the Democrats terrified because he's independent. He's going to say what he wants to say, and he's not going to go with the flow. And so they're going to try and pick him off with bullet votes, or they want to get him out.
You ain't picking that dude off.
No, and
No way.
he's going to be a real agitator in there. And that's great for democracy. And we don't need one agitator, we need 4 or 5. Back in the day, if you were an alderman, and Dave Gilmore was an alderman, and Jimmy Griffin was an alderman, and Larry DePillo's an alderman, good God, it's like that's democracy.
Shit would have been flying around, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's democracy. And you have to work this stuff and different ideas. It's not just, I have an idea, I'm the mayor, everyone does this. So the example I give, if you go to Hartford, does Governor Lamont, does he control the chessboard? No, the House of Representatives is coming up with bills, the Senate's coming up with bills, the governor comes up with some bills. They're all coming up with stuff. And they negotiate, and so in Waterbury, it's the mayor. It all comes from the mayor's office down. The aldermen aren't coming up with ordinances. Only one I can remember off the top of my head is Frankie Chiazza wanted Waterbury to be an abortion-free zone back like 25 years, and it drew national attention that this was his idea, that Waterbury be an abortion-free zone. But these aldermen, like Nelson Roman, he will know how to do this, and he will do this. He'll come up with something. And it'll be so ideas will be coming from the people through the aldermen, not just from the power down.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. I mean, everything's coming from the top down. You get people, you keep them ignorant, you buy them off, give their family members jobs, whatever you can do to get their vote. But the main thing is to keep them ignorant. And I think that these aldermen, they vote for a lot of different things that they don't even know what they're voting for. They were just told, no, this is a good idea. We got to do this for Waterbury, blah, 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 and then they vote for it. I think we need to make these aldermen accountable, whether that's sticking a camera in their face after a meeting, sending them a text message, a phone call, knocking on their door. Simple question, why? Why did you just vote for this? And I think that's very important, and I think the way to change this Palace Theater is you have one idea as a referendum, which I think would be an extreme amount of work. The other idea would be through the aldermen. If you had 8 like-minded aldermen that said, you know what? Enough is enough of these bogus shows, and it's hurting downtown Waterbury. We need to force a change. And that's what I'm hoping for, because this isn't just the Palace Theater and bringing acts in and involving the community. This is about economic development. Mike DiGiancarlo said that Frank Tavera told him a study was done, and the average person that goes to the Palace spends $22 a person locally, which that's not true, because when you busload kids in, they're each not spending $22. But the night of a real show that I've seen over there, people will go out before, have dinner, they'll go out after, have a drink, have a cup of ice cream, a cup of coffee, whatever. It's economic development. So the way I see it, over the last 20 years, we've lost $60 million in economic development to this downtown Waterbury. That's why the place is vacant. They're empty buildings, and that's why we got to start buying these buildings, because downtown, half of it's empty.
Well, what's unique about your championing the Palace Theater is there's no obvious angle that you're working. You're not trying to run the Palace Theater, or you're not going to be the guy doing the concessions in there. This is thumping in your heart, because you're a theater goer or a concert goer. You go to a lot of shows all over the place. And so you doing this, like, you see what this thing could be, where much of Waterbury doesn't see it right now. You see what it was when you were a kid. I didn't live here then, back in the 70s and 80s. I went to some shows, I went to some events at the Palace Theater when I first moved here, and it was world championship boxing matches. And they'd have it on closed circuit.
Yeah.
And there'd be 1,500 guys in there screaming, yelling. There's very exciting stuff.
Well, you saw that?
Yeah, I saw a few of those.
I never went to those, but I did hear about them.
Yeah.
Closed circuit TV.
Yeah. But I think you should be commended, and I do commend you for picking up the ball and championing this, because that's real leadership, and I think that's what it needs. It needs someone who's fearless and to tangle with all this. And what you were talking about, trying to keep the aldermen accountable. What's difficult is the Waterbury Observer is very diluted right now. I'm not doing it as much as I was. WATR is diluted. The Republican American is diluted.
Public access.
So the vehicles of accountability, the business models in all of these have been wounded by the internet. And so they're very difficult to sustain. So you have Dawn doing her Facebook thing, or the Waterbury Times guy that does some stuff. Actually did a great job. I found out about the election results from him. I was up in my house in Litchfield County. I'm trying to find out, did you win? And it was through that guy. It was through his numbers and his reporting. There's nobody, I wasn't down here. WATR wasn't doing it. I don't think the Republican American was doing it. Nobody was doing it. We used to have 5 or 6 people trying to get
Remember you had WATR down there at newspaper headquarters.
Yeah, there's no
Tom
headquarters
Schutz,
now.
Salim Nujame, they'd go on, they'd talk about the election. We'd have election coverage down here, live.
Yeah.
Tom Carosella, Anthony Casagrande. I came on as a guest once or twice, but there's absolutely nothing no more. And that's to the advantage of whoever's in power.
You're absolutely correct. And because it's the watchdog of City Hall, it's a political reporter that just, there's times during the last couple years of Mayor O'Leary's office, there was nobody covering them. The political reporter that had been assigned that was their beat, they left, and then nobody was doing it. They would sort of piecemeal. This one would do it one time, but it used to be people going in there every day for the daily paper. And it just, now you have a mayor, a very powerful, influential mayor, with no eyes on him.
Nothing.
And, yeah, that's not good for the city.
There's no accountability here. I mean, you could almost get away with murder in the city and nobody would know about it. I mean, that's the reason why I came back. That's the reason why I ran for alderman. I didn't want to be an alderman.
Yeah.
But my next step to get this theater open was to do that. Maybe I could do something from the inside. And thankfully, I lost. I know why I lost, but thankfully I lost because I wasn't ready to go to all these meetings and start arguing with all these people. All I want is to get this theater open. So the next venue to do that was coming on TV, going on the internet, just like this show right here. It'll be uploaded to Brass City TV on YouTube. Anybody in the world could look at it. I've had several friends from Florida watch the shows. So for me, this was the next step to expose it. I could do it on my time, just like you do your newspaper on your time, and that's it. So, you know, we're going to keep pushing this issue until it's resolved, and it has to be resolved. It has to, for the viability of the city.
Yeah, so you have to look at how to do that. I heard on your last show, you're saying, okay, get some protesters in front of the Palace Theater. There has to be some lever to pull to bring the people back into this conversation. And it's about ownership, and that it's not serving the people of Waterbury well. It's not bringing in the consumer that you want. If every one of those shows was sold out and they're doing 100 shows, you wouldn't be sitting here right now.
No, I wouldn't be.
No, you would be going to the shows.
Absolutely. I mean, if they did 100 shows a year like they're supposed to, and if they were 80% full average, they'd be bringing in 2,000 people a night. Times 100, that's 200,000 people a year. That's 4 to 6 times more than they're bringing. Downtown, the complexion of downtown would be completely different. Because I went to shows in the past to take pictures in 2018, like I said on my other show, David Bryan from Talking Heads was there, sold out. This downtown was mobbed before and after the show. And that's what I told Mike DiGiancarlo. Could you imagine doing that 2 times a week, every single week of the year, in addition to all the other stuff that should be going on at that theater? Downtown, the complexion would be completely different.
Well, I agree, and I think that...
So what's the next step then? What are we going to do about it?
Well, I think it has to look into how do you start a referendum? What is that mechanism, and does it apply here? Is there something in that contract that says, okay, if they're not meeting these things, and all these numbers, all this stuff, all these special shows, the special little things, I believe that was in reaction to you creating some heat on them. Then they suddenly start all these little shows. So it's smoke and mirrors. So they weren't doing those things in 2015 and 2014. Like, you cast a light on them, and Frank Davino was roaring about the stuff as they flinched. And now they find a way to jump over the bar as minimally as possible. So the bar in the Palace Theater, in a high jump terminology, is the bar is about 6 inches right now, and Frank just steps over it. Like, we need that bar up at 7 feet 9 inches and get over that thing and make an impact and make a difference. And I think Frank has been kind of gliding along without someone putting the heat on him. And I thought Mayor O'Leary is going to put the heat on him, because he's very good at putting the heat on people. But he clearly didn't, because it would have changed.
Well, he clearly didn't, which means to me that he didn't want to. He wants to keep it exactly the way it is.
Well, I think from my understanding of him and of Mike Jargura, as I said before, there was blind spots about the quality of life issues in Waterbury. They didn't care about the arts. They didn't care about things. They cared about brick and mortar. And so Mayor O'Leary is, like, I'd call him Bob the Builder. You know, he was always knocking things down and he's the brownfields mayor. I mean, it made enormous differences navigating through all this labyrinth of stuff with Region 1, the federal dollars that came in from the EPA that came in to clean these sites up. He pulled out a lot of rotten teeth. And now what are we going to put in those spaces? That's up for the next mayor or the next generation to try and figure that out. But he wasn't focused on arts. We have an art committee, a public art committee. What do?
The bare minimum.
No, they painted some crosswalks over by the Mattituck Museum. So I'm involved trying to get some public art, working with some Hispanic leaders, trying to get a Taino mural in the south end of Waterbury. So it's indigenous to the Puerto Ricans, Cubans, Dominicans, people of the Caribbean. This is their people before the Europeans arrived. And so public art is like, There is no public art here. You drive into Hartford, it's on the side of buildings. It's all over the place. You go into Philadelphia, it's on the trestles, the train trestles. It's all over the place. We don't have that. And it can happen just if you just prioritize it. And it can happen very quickly. But it's not the top priority, but I think quality of life is just as important as the buildings themselves and cleaning these things up. And it's what's the soul? What's the soul of the city? And our soul is, we have a pretty screwy soul here in Waterbury. The people have been abused for 100 years, 150 years. It's not this year or 5 years, 150 years ago. They don't have a say in it. You know, it's just the powerful people just dominate the population with fear and intimidation, and it's not, I don't think Mayor Pernaruski is dominating with fear and intimidation right now, but Mayor O'Leary certainly did.
And he still is.
Perhaps. I haven't seen him for
In
a
all
long time.
honesty, I mean, he's the one who's calling the shots in the city. He's not doing the day-to-day work, but all these buildings and these projects, One Exchange Place, Odd Fellows, Sacred Heart Church, that's all through him.
Well, he set all that stuff up. So
He set it all up.
So whoever came in was going to carry forward. Like Giordano was the mayor when the Brass Mill Mall opened up. He didn't do anything. You know, he just cut the ribbon. It was Bergen who did it with the knocking down Scovilles. And so whatever's happening now, it's like dominoes. It's O'Leary spent 12 years knocking down dominoes, and they're going to ripple for decades. Still, like, what's going to happen on Freight Street? It's because he did all that stuff. But it's hard. I remember seeing Dawn Marano had a commercial, or she did a post during the election when she was running against Paul Pernaruski, and she was standing in front of Freight Street and saying, yeah, okay, Mayor O'Leary knocked all this stuff down. Where's the business? If I'm here, business is going to pop up here. It doesn't work that way. You got to remediate the soil. It's such a laborious process. And it's easy just to say, I'll do this, I'll do that. It takes a long time to do this stuff. It took a long time to take these things down. It's going to take a long time to replace them and do it in a thoughtful way. And is Mayor O'Leary still pulling the strings of power? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know that. But I do remember asking him near the end of his run as mayor, I said, how much influential stuff takes place inside the mayor's office during the day, or takes place in Diorio's or in D'Amelio's or La Tavola over dinner and over a couple drinks? And he said 75% of the stuff takes place at night. That's where the ideas, that's
The
where
brainstorming, how can we make more money?
it's
Let's
like
take
4
care
or
of
5
each other.
very influential guys, a money guy, a politician, a lobbyist. They're having dinner, they're having drinks. That's what's deciding. That's what's moving this forward. And is Mayor O'Leary still doing that? I believe he probably is. And I think Mayor Pernaruski would probably be sitting at those tables. But I think Mayor Pernaruski the perception widely was that he was just going to follow whatever Neil did. And I don't think that's happened. I think he's found his own little niche. And he's doing okay with what he's doing. He's not rocking the boat. He's not tackling thorny
Status
issues.
quo.
Yeah.
Status quo.
And-
Do it a bare minimum, status quo.
But there's a lot on his desk to do status quo. So from the O'Leary administration, there's piles of projects like this. You have to manage them.
Yeah.
You have to manage them. And so that was the fear that Roland had when Larry DiPillo was going to be sitting at that
Couldn't
desk.
control them.
No, you can't control him. He's going to open up that file and say, no, let's have a hearing, da-da-da. So you want someone that's going to keep things going along.
Hanson Paul's doing it.
But the people have to get involved in this process, and the people don't vote. They don't voice their opinions. It's the same 2 or 3 people at the Board of Aldermen. You go up, I live up in Litchfield County. I started as a journalist in Litchfield. I went back in the 80s. They had a town budget, a hearing for the town budget, and there was 1,000 people that crammed into an auditorium to discuss the budget. Here, there's like Marty Spring and
The usual suspects.
yeah, the usual suspects. So
Yeah, but I mean, you could understand why.
the people are not engaged.
Yeah, but I mean, they believe whatever we say or do, they're going to do whatever they want anyway. Unless you went down there with an army, now you got people's attention. If you walked into the Palace Theater, if you went to the Aldermanic Chambers with 50 people, all hooting and hollering, guess what? You got their attention. And if you kept doing that, that would force change.
Well, Nelson Roman came.
And that's what I believe with Nelson. I believe finally we have somebody that has enough balls to stand up and do the right thing for the people of Waterbury and not the insiders that are running the city.
Well, he attempted this year with I was going to have a whole slate of candidates to challenge the endorsed Democrat alderman, and then they did a faceplant by not getting enough signatures. But at the Democrat convention, there was 50, 75 people in the back of the room, all new faces, energized, wanting to challenge the old guard. And so that fight has begun. Nelson got through with the fight, but everyone else didn't get it. They weren't on the primary slate because they didn't get enough signatures. But there's other opportunities looming, and I think they're going to keep going and keep trying. So the people need to, even some of the stuff about when I'm talking to Mayor O'Leary about trying to educate the aldermen about what is your job, how can you do it, what is an ordinance, what is expected of you, how can you better serve the people. There needs to be workshops going into these neighborhoods explaining what the Board of Aldermen is, how you can interact with it. On your street on Columbia Boulevard is like there was Mashad for aldermen all down that street, but how many people even know what the Board of Aldermen is, or what the issues are, or how they can raise their hand and say, I have a bunch of wood in my yard and I need it cleaned up, and so they get aldermanic candidate Mashad makes a call, boom, it's cleaned up. So now that woman will know, oh, that's how this can work. But there's just a total
Yeah, but they don't want
disconnect.
that, because then you get people involved and they go to the meeting, they start complaining, and now they got, breath on the back of their necks that they better do something, and that's exactly what they don't want. But that's exactly what needs to happen. Like these aldermen, especially these new aldermen, they need to be like workshops.
Yes.
Today we're talking about the Palace Theater, we're talking about the Odd Fellows building, we're talking about Exchange Place. Here's the numbers, here's how it transpired, and here's what we see are the problems. And just like these, because they have caucuses before they vote, like on all these deals. And they go in the back room and the mayor, whomever, will stand up and blah, 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 give their spiel, everything's going to be great, blah, blah, blah. And then that's it. You need a counterbalance. You say one thing, I come in and say, listen, what he just said, here's why I disagree with him, and show the other side. We don't see any of that over here. And these people they don't know any better, and they just vote for whatever they're told.
There was an aldermanic candidate back maybe 2009. One of the smartest people in the city. She's now the city librarian who you've clashed with on social media. But Rachel Guest wanted to be an alderman. So she went through the process and to be an alderman. So you go through this screening process. And Ron Napoli Sr. was one of the guys interviewing. And so I had said, hey, someone's coming in. This is a great possible candidate. So I just said a good word about her. And so a couple weeks later, Ron comes up to me and says, oh, your friend is, and I know her, she's not my dear friend, but I like her. And he said, oh, your friend is, she had a great interview. I mean, she had great answers until I asked the last question. And what was that? And I said, okay, you have a vote coming up, and the party wants you to vote a certain way, but your personal belief is different, what are you going to do? Are you going to vote your personal opinion, or are you going to vote with the party? She goes, I'll vote my conscience.
See you later.
And he goes, that was it. And he goes, how naive. How naive. That's what you want, someone to vote their conscience.
Not these people.
No. And
How are they
so
going to get things through?
she couldn't even get on the slate because she showed a modicum of independence. That she wasn't controllable. She wasn't just going to say, yes, whatever you tell me to vote.
Which is what we see.
And many of the people, they're feeding at the trough. They work for the city, or their loved one works for the city. So they're marginalized. They're vulnerable to politics and strong-arm politics. Andy, you don't vote the way I want. Your son Andy he's gonna lose his job as a teacher.
That's it.
Yeah.
And that's how it works, and that's how it's been working, and that's why everything that we see, Waterbury's always last. All this Palace Theater, all the money that was spent, Waterbury people are last. It's not about us. These deals that they made, it's not about us.
How are we doing with the time?
We got 2 minutes.
Well, you keep pushing. You keep pushing and keep fighting because you are the guy. The Palace Theater is on your back right now. And Frank Davino's looking down at you and saying, don't give up. You keep pushing. You push and push and push. And
Well, I'd like a little help maybe from John Murray and the Waterbury Observer. That'd be a nice help. Little publicity, show people what's going on. And that's the problem. Nobody wants to say anything about anything. There's probably, you could count them on one hand, 5 people in the city that'll open their mouths and not be afraid to talk, like what I'm doing, and that's it. But everybody else, they all go in a cocoon, and somebody else will deal with it.
well, it's so you're calling me out. I don't really have the platform right now. It's like I don't have the paper. The physical paper I print once a year. So I have all these stories.
But you got the internet. You got your website. You get thousands of people commenting on your post. I mean, that's your avenue right there. Newspapers like obsolete.
Well, that's where the impact is.
I mean, everything's on this. Everything's on the phone. And now it's not even print. It's just videos. That's where we just keep scrolling and scrolling, and you laugh a little bit. Oh, wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that. And that's what I'm going to do here with some of these shows here. I'm going to break them up into little clips,
Yeah.
put them on TikTok.
Yeah, this is a very good point. And I think in the last year, we started off talking, 32 years of doing this, I was freaking exhausted.
Of course you're exhausted. I don't even know how
Exhausted.
you're doing it. I give you a lot of credit, 32 years.
Exhausted. And I have a little granddaughter I spend a lot of time with. And so
That's what you want to do.
I'm not in the game the same way that I was. And doing all the stuff on social media, there's no money. Like, you're not making any money out of this, but the Waterbury Observer is a business.
Sure.
I make no money off of almost anything I do.
No.
So am I going to
You're doing it out of the goodness of your heart.
And I do a lot of things out of the goodness of my heart.
Well, that's because you're a good person, and that's what it's all about. But we got to wrap this up.
All right.
I really appreciate you coming on the show. It's been a lot of fun. Old times. Once I find the lost Palace Theater tapes, we'll have to bring back that old interview that you and I had, which was a lot of fun. And I appreciate you coming on, and hopefully we can do it again.
Thank you, man.
Okay, my name's Andy Michaud. Thanks a lot for watching Taking It Back to the Streets with my special guest, John Murray. We'll be back the following week, next week, not exactly sure. Nelson Roman, who's also known as Rafael Feliciano.
Roman,
running for the Board of Aldermen. We're going to try to get him on next week. So I want to thank you, everybody, for watching Taking It Back to the Streets. My name is Andy Michaud.